All right, Cousin Tone. Our next guest seemingly does it all in the hobby. We were fortunate to have met him on another podcast hosted by Jeremy Lee. You may have heard of him. And we are blessed to now have him on our pod to share his story. So here he is, Mr. Leighton Sheldon. Welcome, Leighton, to the Cousins Collectibles podcast. How you doing, brother?
Oh, I'm doing great, and I'm very appreciative and grateful for you folks having me on here tonight. And listen, it's if this is our job and we're talking cards, it really could be a lot worse. So
Definitely. It's not quite my job, but it seems to be yours, brother. We did some research on you, and I was amazed by what we found. How many tentacles you have going on in the hobby. So I really, let's get into it, man. You, sir, are a pretty busy individual when it comes to the hobby. I believe you have like 3 IG accounts. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you got at Leighton_Sheldon, you got at just_collect, and at vintage.breaks. Is that correct so far?
yes,
Okay. And you're also the host of Trading Card Therapy podcast and Leighton's Loft
yeah.
podcast.
I
And
guess
then you have
you guys did your research. I'm impressed.
yeah, and then you have regular appearances on Sports Card Live with Jeremy Lee. And I think you're also a store owner. Am I correct on that?
Yes, as of last year, actually, I'm very very happy with it. It was kind of like a childhood dream come true.
I can imagine. But my question is, brother, how do you have the time? I mean, seriously, like this is a little ridiculous, but I want to give us a description of a day in the life of Mr. Leighton Sheldon. How does it all go down, brother?
Well, sure. I appreciate you asking me, but I want to make sure that I think you mentioned, Oz, that you don't quote unquote do this full time.
Hmm.
But I mean, it's folks like you, it's folks like your cousin Tony, it's folks like Jeremy. I mean, really, you might look at me and say, well, how do you do it all? I do the same with folks like you that don't do this full time, or Jeremy, who has a job in the hobby full time, but the guy's seemingly podcasting like every minute of every day that he's not working at his job. I'm like, forget about your family. How do you have time for the bathroom?
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
appreciate everyone laughing, but kind of getting back to center, one of the things I was talking about it was someone I went out with to lunch today from work. He recently joined our company and was really excited about that. And we were talking about, some of the things that I used to do, if you will. And so I guess I can share that. And so, as an entrepreneur, as a fellow business owner, one of the things that I used to do, but I don't do anymore, is I don't strive for perfection, because basically it's impossible. You're
Hmm.
going to drive yourself crazy. And if you actually achieve perfection, the cost of it, I don't mean the monetary cost, but the time cost, the time up here occupying your head of trying to be perfect, it really could just, as far as I'm concerned, I'm really happy I worked on that and I let go of that. So that's number one. And number two, I would say, at least off the top of my head, is delegating. And I think whether it be you're in baseball cards or, you're, working in corporate America for one of the Fortune 500 companies, if that even exists anymore, right? If you want to accomplish more, you do that by delegating. But what I've since learned about delegating, that's kind of like the third bucket. Everyone, at least in my business, right? I know there is AI out there, and I don't like to, joke about it, but like the people I work with are humans. And so people appreciate you picking up their lunch. They appreciate when we moved our offices, we upgraded tremendously, both the actual physical space, forget about the store, and then the surrounding neighborhood. So people are so much more happy to go out for lunch and sit in the park for a spring or a summer day. And so, I just think that kind of getting back to center, ask me how I handle it all,
Hmm.
kind of very carefully. At the same time, I've let go a lot. I've
Yeah.
had no choice. And so that's, in a nutshell, how I handle it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I used to be a manager, and at first you try to do it all. It's one of those, if it's gonna be, it's up to me type deal, and if I want it done right, I got to do it, and you got to learn to get past that because again, being a perfectionist, which I am, and you probably are as well, and I know Tony is. It's like those are the things. It's like, man, just get out my way. I'll do it. I'll do it. Just move. And you got to learn to put your trust and faith in the individuals that you have working for you. So that's a big step, honestly, like when you have that, like you said, that ability to just be always encompassing everything and trying to get it all done. And once you finally say, you know what, you do it, you take a deep sigh, deep breath, and you let somebody else do it, and then you realize, hey, they can do the job if I allow them to. So that's a really big step, and I appreciate that. So now, okay, so we know how you do it, but what is this all going about? So let's go first, like what's Just Collect, and then go into vintage dot breaks after that.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I appreciate asking. And as far as Just Collect goes, we started off like many businesses do, doing something a little bit different. So, my hobby experience for those who are at least similar to my age or maybe a little bit older, before Steve Hart and the unopened game, there was a gentleman by the name of Mark Murphy, the baseball card kid. And so I graduated Rutgers College in 2000. And instead of joining corporate America, because I was fortunate enough to kind of, you know, figure out my way through school with baseball cards and Johnson and Johnson, I decided that when I was done with college, that instead of quote unquote using my degree to join an accounting firm or do business consulting, I wanted to try to pursue a passion. And even though the Jets definitely should have taken me up, even as a backup quarterback, because I mean, look, it's 20 years later and they're still floundering. They haven't made the playoffs in 13. I mean, it's just gross, really. But anyway, as far as like the way Just Collect started, I joined Mark Murphy, the baseball card kid. I helped run his business, which was a small mail order business, but he was doing several $1,000,000 a year in sales. And even though that is a big number, back in 2000, the early 2000s, that was very big in baseball cards. There was no $1,000,000 baseball cards. There was no $10 million auctions. People were like, wait a minute, you just went to a 4-year college and you're going to work for a baseball card guy? I'm like, well, he's not a guy. They're like, does he have a store? I'm like, not really. No, it's private by appointment only. They're like, well, how does he make any money? I'm like, well, he does mail order. They're like, you mean like, the stuff on the back of like a box from a cereal? You send in stuff. I'm like, no, man, it's a niche business. I'm trying the best I can to explain to people. And the cool thing was, and maybe one day my son Crosby, who's hopefully now sleeping, who just turned 8, will listen to these podcasts back. I want him and anyone else to realize, even though I had no idea what the F I was doing, I at least pursued a passion of mine. And knowing I'd gone to school, and by the way, I'm not saying school's right anymore, who knows?
Hmm.
But at least having a fallback plan in
Right.
my own mind, it actually gave me more confidence to pursue what I really wanted to do, which was, like I said, the Jets didn't call. I wasn't good enough for alongside Jeets at second base. So I decided to pursue sports cards. And then when I left Mark Murphy's after 2 years, I went to go work for Leland's, an auction house, which many folks in the industry know. They used to be in Long Island. Prior to that, they were in New York City. And, I joined them, quote unquote, as a card specialist. I left there 4 years later as director of acquisitions, and I still keep in touch with Hef. Congratulations to him. Him and his wife just had a baby.
Oh wow.
And may
Right.
Josh Evans rest in peace. We lost him,
Yes.
in the last year or so. And so, I kind of got a nice experience across like unopened cards, vintage cards, the auction house. And so when I left Leland's, I really started Just Collect, even though I wanted to buy and sell and be, kind of like doing it like a cowboy, right? Having some fun in the wild, wild west. I really did it with the long tail of mind, actually. And before Probstein and PWCC, I guess shout out to those guys who work really hard in the eBay consignment world. And I guess Brent's no longer there. Just Collect was actually before them. And we were doing, believe it or not, a few $1,000,000 in our first year of business, because I had this vision when I left Leland's. Hey, there's a lot of like $1,000 and under items that are just not being handled by the auction houses.
Mhm.
And Scott Gaynor was an eBay consignment guy at the time. And so, I kind of saw, if you will, what I believe to be the writing on the wall. And it seemed really exciting. And then, some things changed, right? Some challenges, meaning, PWCC and Probstein started to offer lower consignment rates. And I was like, this doesn't seem that cool. I don't want to work for less money and work
Yeah.
harder. So I'm just, I'm being honest. And so I always enjoyed buying and selling. So over time, I took Just Collect from a firm that was handling largely consignments and a little bit of buying and selling. And I flip-flopped, not overnight, over a duration of time. And it wasn't easy. But I was able to do it, with the help of my team, which, believe it or not, even though we're a small business, I have 2 members. Shout out to John and Robert from my Just Collect staff. They've been with me for just about 15 years, which is pretty amazing because we're only about 17 years old. And so, the first couple of years were a blur anyway, but kind of getting back to center. So Just Collect then started to buy and sell. And by the way, cut me off at any time because I can
No,
talk
no,
forever.
no.
But instead of trying to look at buying and selling, and I love buying and selling at card shows. I think it's super fun, and almost like makes you feel like a little kid. But I wanted to scale. I wanted to do this at a level where, candidly, I could do this full time, and I didn't want to move back home, and I wanted to have some legs underneath me and feel good about what I was doing. And so, believe it or not, I taught myself a little bit about SEM and SEO, search engine optimization, search engine marketing. And so I definitely wasted a bunch of money on the SEM side of things, trying to figure out like how to get leads, meaning with people with cards to sell. And then I decided, I'm like, what about SEO? And I learned more about that. And I decided to start giving people information on our website at at justcollect.com. What we've done is we really invested in helping people try to figure out what they have, whether it be their graded cards or their ungraded cards. People do contact us with autographs and memorabilia, but I always tell them, I'm happy to help, but my expertise is within cards, specifically vintage cards. And so what we try to do at justcollect.com is we've streamlined our appraisal process. So without exaggeration, we probably get in a given day, I don't know, anywhere from like 25 to 50 inquiries via email and phone. Most of them, don't get excited, most of them are not that great. But we are able to, efficiently, get through them. And so literally in just the last 2 weeks, we bought 2 different tobacco collections. One of them was a walk-in. The other one was an appointment. They drove up about 3.5 hours away. And so that's probably the most fun of the job, is the actual treasure hunt. You never know what's going to turn up, for Just Collect.
Yeah. We're going to ask you about that whole appraisal process, because there's some things that I
Sure.
know you probably have to break some people's hearts, but we'll get to that.
Oh, I
But
definitely will.
yeah, I wanted to ask you though about vintage breaks, because like we're not big into the breaking scene. We kind of just buy singles for the most part. Is there a difference between what you guys do with the vintage breaks and modern breaks, or it's kind of just like how does it all go down with that?
Sure. So, we're very proud of what we do at Vintage Breaks. VintageBreaks.com has been around for about 5 years now, which is hard to believe. And when we started it, really, there was no competition. There was not a single person, handling any, if you will, vintage breaking. And for those that are listening to your show that maybe have never even heard of that concept, of course, people have heard of card breaking, if you're in the card world. And for the most part, almost every breaker is breaking modern product. Modern product maybe being that current year's product or the last 2 years' product. And if that's your cup of tea, that's great. It's a great way to go in and get Detroit Tigers or Arizona. Maybe whatever the case is at a fraction of the price instead of having to open up a whole case. And to be fair, you get the entertainment portion of it. And so fast forward, I saw that going on at the National for a couple of years. And I mean, I saw a lot of commerce happening. It was very exciting to me. And I literally went from booth to booth. I'm like, hey, is there anyone doing any vintage? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. Has anyone opened up a pack of 1968 Topps baseball? They're like, no one does that. I'm like, oh, well, if I had all the money in the world, I would do that. So believe it or not, that's what happened because, obviously I don't have all the money in the world since that date. However, I was able to figure out that my love of opening up just an actual single vintage pack in the 60s, 70s to 80s, I wasn't alone. And depending on the cost of these packs, if you will, we didn't fractionalize it in the sense of like what Collectible does, but we did fractionalize it. In other words, if there was 12 cards in a 62 Topps baseball cello pack, well, we were the first people to sell a 1962 Topps baseball cello pack by the card. So what that means for people who are listening who've never heard of this, we would take a 12 card cello pack from 1962 Topps baseball, I'm making it up. We'd sell it for $250 a card. And we wouldn't open it up until all 12 cards were sold. After they were, we would randomize that list of names in order, on the screen. And then whatever comes up, that's the order we'd follow for the pack. And then we would open it for people. And what we were finding, Tony, Oz, is that, of course, people like to see if they were going to make money and if the good card came out. But we were amazed at, just like in modern, opening up of packs and modern breaking, there were people on the sidelines joining our community who didn't have the money to participate in the break, but they really were like, wow, this is super cool. This is like entertainment. I'm like, maybe I should get that a white, or showing my age here.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
we'll see. But nonetheless, that really was how vintage breaks started. So it started by the whole notion of like, hey, I'd like to share my love of opening up old vintage packs with people, and then because they're so expensive, you kind of share in the cost.
Mhm.
I.e., one person buys one card, and then you get to open up these super cool packs, which unless you're Hal Steinbrenner of the Yankees, you don't get to open really. And so that really springboarded doing set breaks. And so for those who don't know what a set break is, it really could be done with a vintage set. It could be done with a 1986 Fleer basketball set. It doesn't matter. What I think super cool about a set break is you're going to put, let's say for a 19 we just listed a 1957 Topps baseball set. There's 407 spots.
Mhm.
So we sell a spot equals one card. And
Okay.
so it is, a patience game, meaning we will not break the set
Right.
from that case until all 407 cards have been sold. But the thing that's super fun about a set break is at the end of the set break, before you do the reveal, someone's going home with a Mickey Mantle. Someone's going home with the Brooks Robinson rookie. Someone's
Yeah.
going home with the Frank Robinson rookie. And as much as I love breaking, it may not be your cup of tea to not know what a pack, a box, or a case is going to yield, meaning vintage or modern. So the thing that's fun about a set break, and when the Jordan rookies were hot, I mean, I'm not kidding, we broke 65 sets of 1986 Fleer basketball. So just let that sit in. We've given away 65 Fleer Michael Jordan rookies.
Yeah.
Given away, people bought
Right.
spots, the whole thing. But what it dawned on us is that just like in any other business, there's different value propositions for people. So all in all, this is my long way of saying that people like breaking with us because we have great vintage offerings that are really not available elsewhere. Number two, you're going to get a card, a pack, whatever that item we're breaking is, you're guaranteed to get something. So we don't run breaks, and I'm not disparaging anyone. I'm not saying there's something wrong, but there's breaks out there where if you don't get that numbered card or your team comes up, you basically get like a ham sandwich. And I'll
Right.
be honest, I don't eat ham. So, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna enjoy that.
Yeah.
So the thing is, my son Crosby, who just turned 8, like I think it's totally fun for him to not know what's gonna come out of the pack. What I don't think is fun is for him not to get a pack.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
he bought into a break, I'm making it up with a box of 24 packs. Hey, I don't care what we get. That's part of the fun. I just want to make sure we get a pack.
Yeah.
And so really that's kind of like how we founded, if you will, the idea of everyone getting something in a break. And the last thing that I think makes vintage breaks really special is we give away a tremendous amount of call them bonuses, freebies that relate to the products that we're selling. But there's a lot of folks who literally just watch us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/vintage breaks.
Mhm.
And, just like I'm sure you guys do, you do fun giveaways every now and then, or you might give away a $5 credit. So we give away stuff, and we've had some crazy things happen where, a guy will get lucky and win a Hank Aaron rookie because he's just been watching the show for a year and he won a little bit of credit and he got into the right break. And so all in all, what we think is we've created a really fun collecting experience, but it's focused on vintage. It's focused on
Mhm.
delivering value. And it is a little bit different than mainstream modern breaking, but it's not
Yeah.
better. It's just catering to that vintage niche.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I know. When I first got back into the hobby, I bought into a couple breaks, and there was times where I just got skunked. And I was like, "Well, this is dumb." It's like I could have just bought a pack or whatever. Like it's just it's a gambling. I get it. It's the thrill of the chase, and it's
You
exciting.
figure
But
out for yourself, right? This is the way I
yeah,
look at it. And I don't know about you guys. I'm a deli guy. We have a shout out to the Milburn Deli, which is down the street from us in New
nice.
Jersey, from our store. But imagine going up to a deli, and instead of them giving you, like you say to them, give me a random sandwich, and they give you a
Mhm.
sandwich. But instead of going up to them and getting that, you say to them, you know what, I want turkey and cheese. And then they say to you, well, guess the way the wheel came up today, you don't get anything for lunch. Wait a minute, no soup for you?
No soup
I
for
don't
you, right?
understand.
Yeah,
Like, so to me, it's just that's not my vibe.
yeah, yeah. I got you. And before I kick it to the eyes, I've seen like on Facebook, I saw there's guys that they run what they call a vintage break, but it's where they just take a Mickey Man. It's a big time cards, whatever it is, and they let's just say they put 500 cards together. They're
Sure.
and you buy in. I mean, it's expensive to get in, but I mean, there's some big time stuff
We
in there, and they kind of
excuse me,
do.
yeah, we've done that as well. I call that a
That's
hit
cool.
random in my world, but I've
Okay.
seen that, and for whatever it's worth, whoever's doing those, I think
Right.
as long as you're transparent. So in other words, if
Yeah.
there's 100 cards, if the buy-in's 500, if the buy-in's $50, it doesn't even
Mhm.
matter. As long as you list what's there and
Yeah.
you do it all on the up and up, to me, I think it's a wonderful way to potentially enhance your collecting experience. Obviously, do
Mhm.
it within your budget, right? Don't go beyond your
Right.
means. But there's some people that are getting chances to get, a once in a lifetime card, or a grail, as we like to call it,
Yeah.
because of these types of products. And, I think, like I said, as long as they're straightforward and transparent, they're great.
Yeah. Agreed. So, all right, let's go ahead.
Cool, cool. So you touched on it a little bit earlier about giving appraisals. So basically, you guys give free collection appraisals. So a couple questions on that. First of all, how many hearts are you breaking? Like you said, how many did you say you had in the last couple months, or actually?
Well, I mean, I would say every day we probably have a couple dozen up to like 50, and most of them are not good,
So
unfortunately.
most of them are not good. So there's a lot of people with broken hearts at the end of that day.
Yes, but the people that really suffer the broken hearts, and please, this is like a public service announcement message to everyone, not just folks who like, hey, you Google just collect. And as much as I think I'm a swell fella, whoever you go to, don't drive 4.5 hours to a card store with your 1980s collection and get upset at them when they won't buy it. And believe me, I understand like the whole idea. We're joking around about broken hearts, but there's a reason why we tell people, as much as we appreciate a walk-in, and we did. We had a good walk-in yesterday of T206s, and they drove a little. They drove from a little whiles away.
Mm.
But I mean, you wouldn't believe it. Like, we've had people show up from like Virginia. I mean, not our current store, but our old office, which is actually by appointment only. We'd have
Yeah.
people show up from like different states. They're like, oh, we heard you guys, we're buying cards. I'm like, who told you that?
Wow. So they would just show up unannounced, and like that's the one thing where like a lot of people, I know with the 80s and 90s stuff, I was found out that way. That's why we're here today. He
Yeah.
didn't know that this was junk wax. So like they're just driving blindly 4 or 5 hours. Oh man, with a bunch of like, I don't know, Howard Johnsons and guys like that. And yeah. I mean,
Well, the
hey, I
worst thing
thought
is,
that was
guys, you've seen this on eBay. It's like, whether it be the Jose Uribe thing or some other error that someone's listing for 1.2 million, they're like, no, I have the Will Clark error. And I'm thinking, like, wait a minute, is there a new Will Clark error? I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's really, so it's a little bit easier, Oz, to break hearts like from a
Yeah.
distance over the computer. But man, when they come in person, like, you
Oh.
feel obligated, like, can I buy you lunch? They're like, I just drove from 4.5 hours away. I'm like, buddy,
Let me do
I'm
something for
doing the
you.
best I can. I got to get to work.
Now, with that being said, obviously you got the broken hearts, but then you touched on it. I know when we spoke to Mike Hefner, he said there was a couple times where he got a hold of a couple collections that was insane. That just the cards or the memorabilia. Like, what's the most insane thing that you've come across? And once you get these pieces, whether it's, you said mostly cards, who's doing the verification, checking it, authentication and all that? Are you delegating that, or are you doing that as well?
Sure. So I think I heard you properly. I just apologize because I don't know if it's my end or your end, but it was like just a little bit broken up in the end.
Mhm.
I heard you ask about, what kind of comes to mind that was kind of, wild, which I'm happy
Yeah.
to share. But then I think I heard something about authentication. Could you repeat that part?
Yeah, basically, like once you get these collections in, who's doing the authentication? Are you personally doing that, or are you delegating that to
Okay.
the other gentleman?
Okay. Sure. So first off, in terms of, not necessarily the wildest, but one of the wildest, if you will, finds or collections that I've come across. So it was last summer. It was a deal out in Arizona. I went to go see a family that inherited a collection of over 800 cards from the 1930s, including over 600 Gaudis from 1933 and 34, which is just absurd. Okay. And most of the time, gang, you can imagine. So when people contact us, they're likely to tell me, for example, if they have 800 cards, but they only have two Beiruths, they're like, I have 800 cards, there's a bunch of different stuff, but I have two Beiruths. You're like, oh, great. Can you send me a photo of the two Beiruths?
Hmm.
And people kind of like inherently know, no matter what industry you're in, right? If you had art, you wouldn't send them, the art that's worth $5. You'd send them the art that's worth $500, or whatever the
Right.
case is. So this family sends us a bunch of images. When I say a bunch, like 50 cards, which is a fair amount, and several Babe Ruths, several Lou Gehrig's. So we do our work. We share with them what we think our estimates are. We try to let them know what we would pay for them. We always explain to folks, hey, it could change in person, right? Maybe you enhance the photo, or you had your 5-year-old niece take it, and like that's why I can't see the crease. I have no idea. But anyway, we try to be straight with people. We try to give them, the information that they're looking for. And so it turned out that it was worth it for me to go out and see this collection. Okay. So I'm excited to go see it. We don't have a definitive deal or anything of that nature, but I feel pretty good that what we've assessed, like if we just bought those cards, I'd be pretty happy. And I know there's a bunch more. Guys, I walk in to this home, and keep in mind, if you've ever been to Arizona, I know people talk about, dry heat. I mean, man, it's wild out there. It's just like, I'm getting hot thinking about it. It's 30 degrees in New Jersey right now. It's crazy. So like, I'm kind of, the reason I'm bringing this up is I walk into this home, I feel like I'm hallucinating a little bit, because I'm looking around the room. I talk to the two brothers, and it's like I'm in a time capsule. There's over 800 1930s baseball cards. Every single one of them is meticulously organized, excuse me, on tables, stacked according to the card number and what it was per issue through the entire front of the house. Okay. So if that's not impressive enough, which it was impressive. So, we do our chit chat and make a couple of jokes. And at the end of it, everyone's feeling comfortable. Appreciate, you coming out, Leighton. They're like, peace and love. We're going to go to the back room and do our thing. You do your work. I'm like, okay, I'm not going anywhere. No problem. So, I take out my pen. I start doing my notes. So I get up, I go to the table, and, I just want to make sure that the Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig's are there. They mentioned, because, sometimes like, Uncle Billy decides like last minute while you're on the flight, like, I can't sell Babe Ruth. Right. You're like, Uncle Billy, could you have told me that before I got on a plane and traveled thousands of miles? By the way, that's happened. There's no real Uncle Billy. I've changed the name for the story. Yeah. To protect his identity and not embarrass him. But he should be embarrassed. But anyway, so I'm doing this. Guys, I'm not kidding. I'm looking at the stuff. And let's just say I'm making up the numbers. But let's just say there's supposed to be, 3 Babe Ruths and 2 Lou Gehrig's, or 3 Babe Ruths and 3 Lou Gehrig's. So I'm looking, once again, every single card is just stacked on the table. They're not in any holders. So, for example, if there was a windstorm, right? If there was a hurricane, no chance. Yeah. No chance everything's kaput.
At least they were out, though, and not just thrown in a box.
Well, so here's the thing. Kudos to the family, and I mean this. I've been to places where, they do the whole peace and love thing. They're going to go on the back. It's 143 degrees in the attic. Everything is like mixed amongst like the cat droppings. It's like, you know what I mean? Like I've seen it all. Yeah. So this, believe me, you're going to see what I'm getting to. I'm pleasantly like very happy here, but you can understand what's about to happen. I'm like, oh my God, am I in candid camera? So I start picking up, I'm like, oh, here's the Babe Ruth. I'm like, wait a minute. I look at my list. Wait a minute. There's only supposed to be 3 Babe Ruths, and it looks like there's 7. There's only supposed to be, and I'm like, no, but guys, what the F is going on here? This is nuts. So, I do a little bit of work, and literally, I'm just like, knock on the door in the back. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Like, anything? I'm like, no, I just want to make sure you guys are aware. There's a lot more Babe Ruths and Lou Gehrig's than you told me. And they did it so nonchalantly. They're like, well, we told you some of them. I'm like, no, I know. Most people, like if they have 2 Mickey Mantle rookies, they don't tell you they have 1. Right. They tell you they have 2. Yeah. If they have 9 Babe Ruth cards, they don't tell you they have 4 Babe Ruths. They tell you they have 9 Babe Ruths, right? So this is very uncommon for me. And as I told the story, I think originally on my podcast, I wouldn't have been shocked if like Kenny Golden pops up from like the basement, like, yo, Leighton, awesome, thanks for coming out. You can help me carry it back. This deal's already done. Like, of course, we were getting these.
Yeah.
So I'm going around, and I'm going to kind of get to the punchline here in the end, guys. In all, there were a total of 22 Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig cards, and as far as I know, they weren't mint condition. They're all lowish to medium grade, but as far as I know, it's the biggest Gaudy find that's ever been made, at least on record. Um, and it completely blew my mind. It was like 3.5 hours straight, like I was taking the SATs all over again. You know, like no, I was sweating, no breaks. I don't even think I had water. I was like, you know, it was like the dew from the morning air. I was like surviving on that. And I just tried to get through it. And, you know, of course, it never goes as easy as you want at the end. But, you know, I was sweating. But, you know, I just took the bull by the horns. I gave my information. I played poker a couple times. And, you know, we were able to buy this unbelievable collection, which without the story is still great. But the fact that, you know, like I have a video for it. We have a whole story. It's on our blog. If folks want to check this out, it's called like the Arizona, like, I don't know, Gaudies in the Heat or something. I don't know what it's called, but it's on our YouTube channel for Just Collect, or on our blog at blog.justcollect.com. But in terms of like recent times, that's one of the craziest, just because most everyone who has great stuff, they don't tell you about like their 80s sets because they don't care.
Yeah.
But the fact that they had so many more Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig cards than they originally told me was mind-boggling to me.
Sheesh. Wow. So how big was the learning curve for them? Like, did you have to educate them? I assume they didn't collect at all. Because I mean, yeah, like how do you tell them, all
Oh
right,
my
you
God.
know, because
See,
that's
I'm
a
looking
whole
at the
nother, you know.
Tony, I'm looking at the time, and I'm
Yeah.
going to try to be
Yeah.
succinct.
Real quick.
It was nuts. And when I say it was nuts, so I say to him, making it up, I'm going to take out a card right now because I have a bunch. Actually, I have a Gaudy right here. So I'll take it out. So let's just pretend this is a Babe Ruth. It's a Frankie Fridge. So I'm like, hey, you know, your Babe Ruth is, it's a 2, you know, out of 10. It's worth, I'm making it up, $8,000. We're going to pay you, I'm making it up, 6,500. And he's like, well, I've seen a Babe Ruth card from the same set sell for, you know, 85,000.
Right.
I'm like, well, it wasn't the same card because that card's right here. And thank you for laughing. And so one of the brothers thought I was funny. The other brother, who wanted more money, didn't think I was so funny. But of course, I was trying to make a point. And I'm like, you know, this isn't like the Mona Lisa where there's only one. They made a lot of these cards, and they're in different conditions and different grades. And I said, furthermore, which is going to really complicate probably your audience who doesn't know much about vintage yet, not every 2 is created equal.
Right.
So if it's a grade of good, which is a 2, or a VG, which is a 3, not every VG Babe Ruth 1933 Gaudy sells for the same. It's just something that you have to learn. Like, just much like if you're in modern cards, right? Like, to my dad, he would never pay you more money for a Michael Jordan number 23 insert. But you and I know that I would pay more money for that. And my dad would laugh at you. He'd probably call you an idiot, honestly. So it's like, it was really hard because I was educating them on not a collection that was, you know, a few $1,000, but a lot of money. Yeah. So believe me, it could take more than the time that we have tonight to explain how the rest of it went down. But it was stressful. I kept my cool. And it's one of those where, like, you know, I bring up poker because for those who play poker, you know, like, you have to maintain your cool no matter what. And so I basically just, you know, I left my chips on the table. I figured if we don't get it, I've done the best I could. I gave them good information. I can't lose money on a collection of this size. It does not make any sense. But I made sure they know. I'm going to document it. I'm going to be really proud to be the owner of this. And so I'll tell you the end of the story real quick. So we reach a deal finally. And I didn't think we were going to reach a deal, but we do reach a deal. And, you know, I don't know. Sometimes things get lost in translation. I didn't bring cash. You know, I don't generally bring cash because, you know, I value, you know, safety. And so I was getting ready, like, write the checks. And at this point, I'm like, you know, I'm going to pay this guy. I'm very excited. He's like, oh, you know, he's like, you know, can we go to the bank? I'm like, sure, go to the bank, no problem. You know, so I literally take him to Wells Fargo, my bank. So I'm standing with, I'm not exaggerating, a pink shoebox of 800 1930s baseball cards. Thankfully, the Ruths and Gaudis are holdered. And, you know, I think we give him certified funds. So I think we gave his brother half of the certified funds, and his other brother got the other the other certified check for the other half. Um, so we're in the bank, and I'm like, oh, so which direction are you going in? He's like, which direction are you going in? I'm like, I think I'm going, back that way to the hotel. He's like, oh yeah, I'm going that way. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess our friendship's over. You've been paid. Uh, I guess I'll call an Uber from inside the bank, and hopefully no one understands what's inside this pink shoebox.
Yeah. Wow.
Jesus.
That's the scary thing. But hey, so
Yeah.
two questions, Leighton. We're coming down the home stretch. With that, you've probably run into screw down holders. That's always
Oh,
so are they as bad as people say, or is that an exaggeration of how bad those things can be to cars in general? Because back then all those guys seem to have had them. So
no, it can be very bad. And I would tell you that, I was going to make a joke, but I just want to be straight with the time that we have left here, to make sure we give advice to people who are out there who are listening to your guys'
Mhm.
podcast, which is awesome for like how to take care of their cards. Folks, if you have a beloved collection of your own, if you've been given a collection as a hand me down or inheritance, and there's cards of value in screw downs. And for those that don't know what we're talking about, those plastic recessed, like about that screw in each corner. The problem is that they can often get stuck, not be able to be removed. And it's one thing like, all right, I can get my card off, but there's going to be, a tearing of it. And so therefore it's going to grade a 2 because there's paper loss. But I've seen some that are really, really bad. And so, when you're talking about vintage, especially, I get why people did this back then because that was the acceptable practice. I'll just show everyone what I use, and this is kind of like what I recommend. This is a card saver. It doesn't actually have to be a card saver, but it could be,
Mhm.
something the equivalent. But you can see, hopefully on the camera, I take it out like this. I pinch the top here, but basically, like when I put it in, I don't need anything else around it. I don't need a penny sleeve. It doesn't move. So whether it be I want to grade it, the PSA, SGC, ISA, Beckett, doesn't matter, um, or whether I just want to store it, like in a shoebox, if you will,
Right.
upright, they're not going to move around, and they're not going to stick. So especially if screw downs, like I bought a lot of collections in Florida. Man, it's humid down there.
Yeah.
So the collections that I actually think there's a story about on our blog. It was horrible. The guy had like Allen and Ginter, King Kelly. I mean, we got it out. Yeah, it ripped. It tore. It tore. There's nothing you could do.
Yeah. Wow. So before I kick it to Oz for the last question, let everybody know where they can find you, your content, your shows, the deli, the Jets season tickets, all that stuff.
Sure. Well, first, guys, really appreciate having me on. The easiest way to find me personally is probably just email me. It's my first name, Leighton, Leighton, at justcollect.com. I check them every day, sometimes middle of the night, depending on how the day was. You can hit me up there. I'm also on IG, which I check regularly. It's my full name, Leighton_Sheldon. My websites are justcollect.com. You can check us out for hundreds of stories and videos about some of the collections we talked about on your podcast today, and much more. There's also a free appraisal form on there as well. And then if you enjoy vintage breaks, meaning checking out the notion of whether it be an old set break or an old pack from the 60s, 70s, or 80s to be opened, even if you don't buy in, come check us out. We break 7 days a week. You can find our live stream directly from our website at vintagebreaks.com, or you can go directly to youtube.com/vintagebreaks. Those are probably the best ways to find me. If they want to check out my podcast, appreciate you guys letting me mention it on here. It is Trading Card Therapy. It's on Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you want a little bit more laid back discussion about cards, where we're talking about cards and sports and, honestly, Swedish fish and anything, I guess, else in between, that's Leighton's Law for you. And what's fun, gang, is that if you tune in, you're going to hear probably there first about some of the collections that, that we buy, that either walk in or, that I traveled to buy. And, that's probably, some of the more interesting content that we, present on there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So let me finish this interview. Basically, Leighton, you're in the know when it comes to deal making, and I'm not talking about these newbie influencers that are at the local card show and they're doing it for the gram and they want to floss on IG. I'm talking about like real OG collectors. Like I always picture like these old dudes in some room, like, and just these deals going down. Like I don't know how it goes down, so I want to know. I want to pick your brain. Have you actually seen like real collectors doing real deals behind the scenes, and how it all goes down?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think that everyone's a little bit different. But I mean, people ask me this all the time. Like, so if you come to the National and you see a card at my booth for a lot of money, or if you see a card at someone else's booth, for someone who's a newbie to the National, they always ask, well, if someone wants to buy that, are they going to walk up with that amount of cash? I would tell you it depends on the venue, right? Some people will want to just pay you right there in cash. Other people might want to pay you via PayPal. Other people might want to pay you via check, Bitcoin, or whatever the case is. Other people, and this is the way I like to do business, Oz. Hey, Leighton, would you like to grab a coffee? Can you bring these 3 cards with you? I have some stuff I'd like to show you, but I like to kind of do it private. Sure. So what I'm encouraging folks to do, and this is a great question, Oz, if you're a collector, and by the way, no judgments from me. So if $50, if $500, if $5,000, whatever the number is for you is a lot, and you want to have a few minutes more of my time or a dealer's time, the one thing you have to understand is it is a business, so they may not be able to drop what they're doing right then. But if you said to me, even if you were buying a card for $5, Leighton, can I ask you something for 5 minutes? I really don't understand something. And I'm buying this card from you. And, of course, listen, we appreciate, all sales. But that's definitely how some of the bigger, if you will, dealers are happening. Because, folks are not whipping out 60,000, 80,000 cash. They are sometimes. But other times they're going to be paying you, like I said, electronically. A wire transfer, by the way, is a very popular way. It's a very popular way that I buy collections. It's a very popular way that people pay me for an expensive card at a convention. They literally will, do it electronically. Hey, Leighton, can you verify you got the wire? Oh, it's in there. Congratulations. We'll take a picture. How you doing? So there's a variety of different ways. I think one of the more fun ways, and I encourage, whatever area of the country you're from, if your local card shop doesn't do this yet, try to get them on board. Gang, some of these trade nights, like at Bleecker Trading in the city, at our own store in Millburn, New Jersey, at Just Collect. I'm 296 Millburn Ave, right up the street from Millburn Deli, the world famous Millburn Deli. Folks love that one-to-one interaction, but it's without the pressure of the convention, right? So think about it. If we're at a convention, I know as a dealer, I'm like, I got to get back to my booth, right? And as you two guys, if you're collectors, I'm sure you're like, hey, I want to check out more stuff. So the reason why I like trade nights, they're a little bit more intimate, and you don't feel like overwhelmed as like, hey, what am I missing? No, it's very much like one-to-one. Oz, you brought some cool basketball. Awesome. Tony, you brought some great vintage baseball. Love to check it out. And if I don't get to see my buddy Justin's vintage hockey, totally cool. But I didn't miss a whole convention. And so I do dig trade nights. I think they're a great place for all different transactions of a variety of sizes to go down. I think they're totally cool.
Nice. Perfect segue. We don't want to announce it completely yet, but we're working on something for the Friday night of the National right across the street from the convention center. So when we're able to announce it, we will. But yeah, you might like it and you might want to check it out. So once we get it all together, we'll throw you an invite. And
yeah, I'm hoping for the VIP, please.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You get to go around the back and then you just keep going around the back and keep going. But go ahead, Oz, take us home.
Yeah, man. Listen, Leighton, it was short, concise, but listen, it was packed with information. We appreciate you coming on board, and we know you got to get out of here because of your son. And, that's the most important when it comes to family. But I wanted to thank you. We met on Jeremy Lee's pod. And when you started talking, I was like, man, this guy's legit. This guy's the truth. And I was like, we got to get this guy on our pod like immediately. And you did your thing. I appreciate you, brother. Did you want to say anything before we go ahead and get out of here?
I did. I wanted to, shout out to Jeremy, not only for, of course, bringing us together. I thoroughly enjoy not only, of course, appearing on Jeremy's show on Saturday nights about 10:15, 10:30 for a Vintage Spotlight. You can check me out there. But also Jeremy's content in general and his commitment to excellence as far as content goes is not easy. So I appreciate that. I did want to give a big shout out to my staff at Just Collect Vintage Breaks. They're actually not all under one roof. Some people remote, work remotely, like in Georgia. Shout out to Gilmore and Charles out west. And then lastly, listen, it's been a tough couple of years for COVID. It impacted members of my staff and their family, and so I really am just grateful to be here. I'm very appreciative to be on the show tonight, and really get to pursue a passion of mine for a living. And if the Jets do call, I'm still here, baby.
You were only one injury away last year. It was guys kept falling off, so you were
Dude, listen, I'm
there, man.
6'1". I keep in good shape. I play tennis twice a week. Like
Okay.
I have a good arm. I'm not. I don't want.
Listen,
I want league minimum. Pay me in
You should have
baseball
called.
cards,
You should have
football
called the
cards.
Niners. You would have been right in there.
I know. I know.
that's
But
funny.
with that, we're gonna end this like we always do, and that's keep focused, keep positive, and keep collecting. Hey, yo, Tone, bring the beat back.